So mae newid roi yn 7:00, so dwi'n meddwl sa well i ni wneud dechreuad. It's just turned 7 o'clock, so I think it's best that we make a start. So, ar ran cyswllt ffermio a Menter Moch Cymru, croeso cynnes i chi gyd i'r webinar cynllunio busnes ar gyfer cynhyrchu moch yn broffwydol. So, on behalf of Farming Connect and Menter Moch Cymru, a warm welcome to you all to the webinar that is Business Planning for Profitable Pig Production. David Owen dwi, swyddog technical moch I cyswllt ffermio. My name's David Owen and I'm Farming Connect's Pig Technical Officer, and I'll be chairing the meeting this evening. So just before we start, I'd like to just point out that this webinar is being recorded and will be saved in our archives. And if you do have any questions during the presentations, please send them through by clicking on the Q&A icon that's on the bottom of your screens. And then towards the end, hopefully we'll have time to go through all the questions. So as you all know, the topic of the webinar this evening is Business Planning for Profitable Pig Production. And we're lucky enough to be joined by Mr. Ken Steppings from Menter Moch Cymru. And also, from Menter Moch Cymru. And Ken, he'll be discussing general pig keeping considerations before taking the plunge and diversifying to pigs. And then following Ken's presentation, Mr. Graham Lever from Eggers Consultancy will discuss the business planning considerations. Graham, he's been involved in agriculture since the late 70s. He's managed a number of large indoor pig units. He's been involved with formulating rations for sows and pigs. And he's been a farm business consultant since the early 2000s. And running his own consultancy firm since 2006. So yeah, between Ken and Graham, we've got plenty of experience and knowledge to answer all your questions, hopefully. So before I ask Ken to share his screen, I'd like to quickly just draw your attention some of the relevant services that Farming Connect have to offer. So first of all, we've got the 100% funded digital surgeries available. These are an hour of one-to-one advice with experienced consultants on a variety of different topics, as you can probably see on your screens. They're usually carried out within hours of your initial inquiry, and they're usually carried out either over the phone or over Zoom or Skype or any other video calling platform. We also have the animal health clinics available, where there's £250 available for sampling or testing. Like all of the Farming Connect services, you'll need to be registered with Farming Connect before you can access the animal health testing clinic. And any testing that there's any, you must confirm your interest before any testing or sampling takes place. The funding is allocated on a first-come, first-served basis, and sampling or testing must be made within 30 days of the issue date. And it's a maximum of one clinic per registered business. We also have the advisory service available. That's always open for fully funded group advice or 80% funded one-to-one advice, and each registered business can access up to 4 instances of advice. So if you're looking for advice with regards to nutrition or something that's relevant tonight, which is business planning, the advisory service would be ideal for you, and would be suitable for your business needs. The skills window opened again on the 3rd of May, and it's open until the 25th of June. There's over 70 different courses available, and all training courses are subsidised by up to 80%. And as I mentioned, there's 70 different courses available, and they're categorised under business, land and livestock. We also have the mentoring service available, where you can access 15 hours of fully funded advice from experienced farmers and farmers that have made positive changes on their own farms. The 15 hours, it can be made up of multiple farmers and we have around 80 different farmers on the directory. So yeah, the mentoring service great for on-farm advice and advice over the phone or over Zoom. And yeah, as you all probably know by now, Farming Connect and Mentor Moch Cymru both have a full program of webinars in place. So contact either Farming Connect or Mentor Moch Cymru for information on upcoming webinars, or if you want to catch up on any that you've missed. So yeah, so for more information, you're welcome to either contact myself or you can contact your local development officer. There's 18 different officers spread across Wales, and they're your first point of contact with Farming Connect. And I'm sure that they'd be more than happy to point you in the right direction. So yeah, you're also welcome to visit the website, as I mentioned, or you can phone the number on the screen to contact the Farming Connect Service Centre. And again, you're welcome to contact myself. My contact details are david.owen@mentorbusnes.co.uk. So yeah, so that's all from me for now. I'll stop sharing my screen and I'll ask Ken to start sharing his. So yeah, over to you, Ken.
Thank you, David. Have I succeeded?
Yeah.
You can see my screen.
Yeah, ideal.
Good, thank you. So I'm Ken Stebbings, I work for Mentor Moch Cymru, and I'm going to cover off some of the sort of physical factors or the pig farming side of things that you'll need to consider before you start doing a business plan. Right, I need to organise my screen a bit better. I think. There we are. So you need to start a plan, and the first thing to consider is what you want to do. It seems obvious, but there are many different possibilities of what you could do in pig farming. And after you've dreamt a bit, then what can you realistically do? So there may be some big ideas, but you should rein yourself in and see what you think is realistic. So the options are many and varied. So it can be anything from outdoor pigs with arks and keeping a traditional breed. You could convert farm buildings and keep a more commercial type of pig within those. Or you could go the full, well, I nearly said the full hog, the full way and build a pig unit and keep high productive hybrids and have a contract with a supermarket or with an intermediary pig company. And as you can probably guess, there are lots of different things. Anything in between is also possible. So those are, I've picked out the two extremes there, really. So you need to define what your system is. That you need to know what the market is. So the important thing to take from this, and if this is the only thing you remember all night, is that you mustn't start keeping some pigs until you know where those pigs are going to go. Because if you think you're going to get out of them making a profit by selling them at the market or selling them anywhere, really, you may find that you don't make the profit. You need to also consider, and this is the biggest difference between pig keeping and perhaps beef, dairy and sheep, is that you need to consider what you're going to feed very carefully, because the feed is the biggest cost that you're going to have. The biggest variable cost in the system will be the feed. Then, moving on, how much capital do you need? If you are going to convert buildings that you already have on the farm, then there will be some money that you need to spend. So they will need, for instance, different drinking facilities and different feed troughs. And you'll need to have sheeted gates so that there's some protection from the elements. And you may need to close in buildings more so that there's less exposure. And after you've considered all that, you may have some idea about whether it's going to be a profitable thing for you to venture into. So the first job then is to define a pig farming system. So are you going to keep the pigs indoors or outdoors? Obviously, there's a massive difference between the systems between in and out. You need to then pick an appropriate breed for whether it's going to be in or out. So high productive hybrids that have been bred for intensive keeping will not thrive in a Welsh winter outside. And the converse is true, that you could spend quite a lot of money on buildings and have a rare breed which is as hard as nails and doesn't necessarily need a very elaborate environment to be kept in. So you need to fit the pig to the system. You need to then decide whether you're going to be breeding and selling piglets or weaners, or whether you're going to be buying weaners and finishing them, or of course you could be doing both, so a breeder finisher. From the breed and the way that you're going to keep them, you'll be able to have some idea of what the pig performance is going to be. So I've got another slide about that in a minute. But obviously, the number of piglets you produce in a year from a breeding herd and the amount of pigs that you can finish and the rate that they finish are going to have a big impact on whether the system is going to be profitable or not. And then, as I've said, feed is a big issue, and you need to define the feed, know what the feed costs, what the range in price can be of pig feed, the pig feed that you've chosen, and then how you're going to feed it. I think most people will be feeding or buying a dry feed and possibly wetting it, but there is an option with feeding pigs to feed it dry or feed it wet. So again, that's another decision that has to be met or made. So here's a few pictures of what we've been saying. So you can see the top left, that's an indoor system, a lot of galvanized steel, some concrete walls and a concrete floor, some straw. So quite a good environment for an intensive pig system, but quite expensive to set up. And then the bottom left is a farrowing situation where you can see that the sow can be confined. The floor is slatted, so there's no cleaning out. The dung and urine fall through the green slots. So again, easy to keep, but quite expensive to set up. And then the finishing on the right-hand side, again, plenty of galvanized steel, a perforated slatted floor, and a controlled environment. So you can see quite an expensive system to set up, but obviously the performance will be greater than it would be if they were more exposed. So this is the opposite, outdoor. And if you drive across the border and into England on your way, there's a very good chance that you'll see scenes like this with pigs being kept outside. So these are breeding pigs kept in arks, but as soon as you've moved over the border and into England, the level of rainfall will have dropped considerably. So you can see there, I've said, beware of mud, and that is a real issue. It's the pigs can be quite happy in the mud. There's a saying about that, but the issue really is that if you are feeding pigs that are in a lot of mud, the food wastage just shoots up. And you can see in the left-hand picture that there's quite a bit of food wastage because of the number of birds that are involved. But certainly if you put good food down in mud, then a good proportion of that will be wasted. And that's the main issue. The pig comfort may be okay. They can be in a pig ark in straw, but if they're surrounded in mud, they're very difficult to feed. The market, I've said you need to know where you're going to sell them, and this is important, but then it links back to the system because there's different markets for different types of pigs. So you need to identify where you're going to sell them, and you produce the pigs that you want to sell into that market. You need to know what that market is, how it operates, and understand the range in price that you'll receive. With pig prices, they're readily available. They're published every week, and they go up and down. It depends on many, many different things. But you need to understand how it can go up and down. You need to understand what the most you can get, but even more importantly, what can the price fall to? And if it can fall to that level, how long can I keep that up? And is it going to result in me getting out of pigs? I've said this already. Don't keep any pigs unless you know where they're going. I'll hammer that message home. They're very expensive to keep. And once you've kept them for too long, nobody will want them ever, because they'll be too big and too fat. They have to go when they have to go. So choose a breed. I've just picked quite a few different native and rare breeds. Here's just 4 of them. You'll probably have a preference if you're going to keep one of these. So these are rare breeds or traditional breeds. So there's a Berkshire, a Gloucester Old Spot, an Oxford Sandy and Black, and a Tamworth there. And if you keep this type of breed, then obviously the performance is going to be a bit less or considerably less than a hybrid. And you need to factor that in. But you may be able to have a niche market, and people will pay you more to eat a Gloucester Old Spot pork pig or not. But again, this is understanding your market. These are pink pigs now, and we call these modern breeds. So we have a Welsh pig there, a large white, and a landrace. And these are often crossed together to produce hybrids. One of the things that I should have said about the traditional breeds and the coloured breeds is that once you've got a lot of them, and if you're trying to sell them to butchers, they're not going to be very enamoured with black or coloured pigs. Most of the butchers, especially in Wales, are going to be quite traditional in this, and they will want a pink pig. And here we have 3 pink pigs. Why are they modern? They have been selected. Their performance is generally a bit better than the pig breeds that I've showed on the previous page, because there have been numerous, these pigs. There's been in the 50s, 60s and 70s, there were a lot of these pigs, and they were selected, and their performance therefore has improved. Whereas the traditional breeds, they've never been numerous, and there hasn't been a great deal of selection pressure put on them to make them perform better. And then finally, we have a modern hybrid. This is from a breeding company. JSR is the breeding company that I've pinched this picture from. So this is a hybrid of numerous breeds, probably a lot of bloodlines from the previous 3 breeds that I've shown you, but obviously there's something with some black in there because there's got some black spots on. It's probably a P-train, another breed. So what to feed? As I've said, this is important because this is a big cost, and it will link back to the type of pigs that you've got. So the density of the diet, or how expensive it is another way of putting it, will depend, or what you buy will depend on what kind of pig you keep. So obviously that last pig that I showed you with the JSR will need a fairly dense diet, and it will be a fairly expensive per ton diet. But the amount you feed will be possibly less because it will finish quicker. Whereas the traditional breeds will require a less dense diet and will take longer to finish. So you need to feed the right feed to the pigs for the system that they're in. Know what the feed costs. There's a possibility to grow some of the feed, especially for breeding herds where you have large sows with large capacities to eat bulky feed. So on Welsh farms, it's possible to grow forage crops and root crops, which can offset some of the feed costs of the sows. You can, of course, feed them to breeders, but for finishers, sorry. But the smaller the pig, the less it is able to cope with anything too bulky. And then the other possibility is that you identify a waste stream and see whether that's a possibility to reduce your feed costs. So there are dairy byproducts and bakery byproducts, vegetable waste, for instance, that could all be used and utilised to feed the pigs. So how much money do you need to start up a pig enterprise? And we'll hear more of this when we do the business planning with Graham in a minute. You'll need to spend some money on sheds and pig equipment, and you can adapt existing sheds, but you need to make the pigs comfortable. A pig must always have somewhere dry and draft free that it can lie. Otherwise, your feed costs will increase yet again, and you may, in extreme cases, increase the level of ill health. So you need sheeted gates, feed troughs and drinkers, and we call that fixed capital. I'm not sure this is up to date, and I'm going to skip this, but there are funding streams for Welsh government from the Welsh government for changes to farm, which are for capital investment. But I don't think the farm business grant is available at the moment, except for anything other than putting a roof over livestock yards. So there isn't a business grant for, say, building a pig shed. The other one is the Sustainable Production Grant, which is a bigger grant system, and you definitely need a farm business plan to apply for that. You can see that the levels of funding there are quite a bit higher, but it does involve quite a lot of long-term planning, and you need to have a plan which lasts for 5 years, showing from where you're going now to where you're going to end up and be a sustainable and profitable farm business. There isn't an expression of interest, EOI's expression of interest window currently available for that one, but there may be in the near future. I don't know. There'll also need to be some working capital. So you need some money to buy the pigs. That could be breeding stock, or if you're going to buy weaners to finish. You then need to buy the feed before you can sell them, or up to the point that you sell them. And that, again, is working capital, plus all the other bits and pieces like bedding, paying for any vet and meds, ear tags, that kind of thing. So that's working capital. After you've thought about all of those areas that I've just mentioned, then you can begin to write a plan. And Graham's going to give you more detail about this in a minute. So you'll need to consider the variable costs. So those are the feed costs, and work out a gross margin, then take away your fixed costs and any charge for the capital that you spent, and work out whether the overall system is going to be profitable. But I'm going to skip over this a bit because this is Graham's territory, really. You also need to work out what the risks are. So how robust is your plan? So how sensitive is it to good performance or poor performance of the pig? The sale price. So as I said earlier, the price of pigs goes up and down. It depends on the market. You need to know what level of what the average price you'll receive is, and what the most and what the least would be, to see how sensitive your plan is to these changes. And then similarly, the feed price can go up and down. It's currently quite high because the cereal costs are quite high. So again, you need to work out if the feed price went up to this level, would my profitability be reduced by so much that I come under pressure? After you've done that, the next stage is a cash flow, and work out what the profit is. And then you can estimate your balance sheet changes and see whether the whole thing is worth doing. But again, more of this from Graham in a minute. I said that the pig sale price can go up and down. And I think there's a sort of in the psyche of Welsh farmers, there's always this feeling that once you've gone into pigs, that's the beginning of the end. and this is because pig prices can go up and down, and certainly if you go back quite a few years, the pig price would go down, and it could stay down for quite a long time, and people lost quite a lot of money on pigs. It tends to go up and down perhaps more quickly now than it used to, but prices do fluctuate. But in defence of the pig sector, they also go up for milk, beef and lamb. And then you don't have to go back many years before, well, about 2015, the dairy farmers were all talking about a milk crisis. The same thing happens, and there may be in pigs, and there may be periods when you trade at a loss. The important thing is to know how long you can last if you are trading at a loss, and obviously, if you can, avoid trading at a loss at all. So this is just to show that the price of pigs goes up and down. You can see that it peaked in 2014 at about 170 per kilo, and then it went right down in 2016 before climbing back up again in 2018. And you can see we're sort of wavering along. There's been a bit of a price reduction this year in 2021, but again, it's beginning to recover again. So this gives you a range of where the prices can be. So just in summary then, what the business plan contains: you've got to define the farming system, which is what I've been talking about. You'll make informed assumptions about the performance of the pig prices and how much the feed cost is going to be. Work out your gross margin, adjust the fixed costs if you've got fixed costs already on the farm. They'll change if you're going to introduce a pig enterprise. Work out how much capital you're going to need and work out the profit. In summary then, pig farming is just farming, and if you do it well, it will be profitable. So it's attention to detail, really, knowing what you're doing, recording stuff, and keeping an eye on the pigs on a regular basis, and spotting any potential problems before they get too bad. Sort out the market, sort out a decent feed price and know what that is. Work out your capital and plan. And just to finish then, Mentor Montgomery and Farming Connect can help you with all of that in terms of defining your system and discussing with you what it is that you would like to do and what you can feasibly do, and then also assist the Farming Connect business planning people with the physical assumptions that are needed for a business plan. Okay, I think that's it. I will now stop sharing the screen, and I'll pass you over to Graham.
Yeah, thanks, Ken. Brilliant. Yeah, really interesting. Yeah, yes, cheers, Ken. Really interesting, and some great points there. So yeah, now I'd like to pass over to Graham. So yeah, that's you, Graham. Now can you share your screen, and then yeah, over to you. Thank you.
Okay, here we go. Can you see? I assume you can see.
Yeah, that's great. If you want to just put into slideshow, just so we've got it in full screen, please, Graham.
Okay. Is that okay?
Ideal. Yeah, ideal. Yeah, cheers. Thanks, Graham.
Okay, well, good evening, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity for me being able to speak to you. Thank you, David, for the introduction. As you can see, my name is Graham Lever, and I'm one of the directors of Aegis Consultancy Limited. And as David already told you, I've been a farm business consultant for 20 years, following roughly 20 years in the pig industry. And I had my own business since 2006. David has already given me an introduction, and this is who I am. And besides farm business, we offer quite a range of services, including diversification and As you can see, grant applications, we do quite a lot of planning as well in relation to rural dwellings and farm buildings. In terms of this presentation, I want to pick up on some of the points that Ken started and then to expand it into business planning. Ken gave a thorough a presentation regarding pig production. He obviously talked about the breeds and the investment, possible investment, and the costs, include the costs you're likely to incur. He mentioned the feed cost, which is likely to be about 75% of the overall cost of the business. One of the things I've noticed being in Wales is that sometimes there's not the variety of feeds available for pig production. On the last place that I worked on, we had 6-7 different feeds, 2 for the sows and 5 for the pigs between birth and slaughter. But anyway, leaving that aside, I think what is important is that if you're going to go into pig production, that you really want to do it. You are keen about it. If you go into it half-hearted, then you could struggle because you will need to be fully committed for it. We will talk about this in a minute, but you need to know what you require financially and also practical support. So getting started, Ken's already alluded to this. You can be quite simple. You can have quite a simple system, which is the picture on the left-hand side. And the picture in the middle is loose housing, which is the preferred way of keeping pigs. I think the only way you can keep pigs now, or maybe you want to do something on the right, which is there to show you can be quite high tech. You can be very into performance of the pigs and making sure that they are maximising the profit. The choice is yours. At the start, it's about looking at resources. Ken's already alluded to this. You can start with a greenfield, which if you look at something, an intensive pig unit, that will be extremely expensive. You can look to convert buildings on the farm. You may want to start small, and there might be opportunities to do that. Pig buildings, you can use typically a steel frame building and make adjustments to it, or red brick buildings to keep pigs, as long as the temperature's right and they're relatively draft free, you should be fine. Alternatively, you can have an outdoor pig unit as well. So the choice is yours, really. Where there's money, that's an old saying, and Ken's already covered off a lot of these. It's about the capital investment that you require. You're then looking at the income that the pigs are going to generate, your trading costs, variable costs, feed, veterinary, straw, other costs related to the pigs, the pig enterprise itself, the replacement breeding stock, of course. We then have the overhead or fixed costs, which would be labour and light and heat and insurance and sundries and rent, if you actually are renting the ground. There's the loans, obviously money that you borrow to establish the pig unit, and the most important one on there is the bottom, which is obviously the net profit. As you know, if you don't make a profit, then you won't be trading for very long. A capital investment is capital costs. It could be the purchase of the land. It's obviously the purchase of the buildings as well, the fixtures and fittings that are within the building, and machinery. Pig units, if you're intensive anyway, indoors, there's not an awful lot of machinery required. You may a couple of tractors and maybe not a lot else. So machinery might be the least of these costs. And the working capital requirement, I'm just going over ground that Ken's already covered really, is purchase of purchase. I need to go. Just hang on a minute. I'm sorry about that. The working capital required. There's obviously livestock, the variable overhead costs, the finance charges, loan repayments, and private drawings. Private drawings are taken out after the profit. It is important that the business is still profitable after the drawings themselves. The net profit is fine, but you still need to be able to cover the costs of the money that you take out of the business for yourselves, and also there are the capital elements of the loan repayments. Before going to the bank, you will need to prepare a business plan, and you will need to know certain things. You will need to have a good idea of how much capital you're going to require to invest in the business. You will then need to know how much working capital you need. You may well need an overdraft facility, certainly at the start while you're building up your enterprise. You will also need to know the available capital that you have to put into the business. It is unlikely that the bank will lend you 100% of the money that you need, so then you will be needing to invest something yourself. Ken's already talked about the different breeds and the level of production. You will need to know that really on a fairly low level of production, the business itself is likely to be profitable. There's nothing worse than having a business plan that relies on fantastic performance to be profitable, because it's unlikely that you will be able to maintain that all of the time. A good idea of the expected costs, and also within the business plan itself, you will need to build in an increase, particularly overhead costs, which generally increase by the retail price index, which currently runs at about 2%. In the presentations that I've done before, I prepared a live budget, which I was able to hand out to those who attended. That's not possible right now, but I have sent the same budget over to David, and he will be sending this out to you. So hopefully it will make some sense. If you have any questions about it, can you please contact me? It's about the budget's designed on a 60 sow pig unit. They are owner occupiers and within 25 acres of grassland, and there are buildings on the site that are suitable for conversion. Within the budget itself, it establishes the working capital that's required. In the budget, we started with £10,000 worth, £10,000. On top of that, it is calculated the need for the amount needs to be borrowed. It was assumed that the loan would be 100,000, and that on the cash flow itself, an overdraft facility of 10,000 would also be required. And lastly, the assets required to borrow that amount of money. It was assumed that the farm was worth £500,000 to start with. So the things that will govern how much you can borrow from the bank. There's existing borrowing. If you're a farm with other enterprises that have loans, then that may well affect how much you can borrow. There could be a mortgage. In the last 12 months, you could have taken out a bounce back loan. And then HP, although HP for machinery generally is not an issue when it comes to borrowing the capital, it becomes part of the calculation when you're looking at the repayments. So all of those things will affect the borrowing. Available working capital, loan to value. We can tend to put these things, both of these together. And most banks you will find will lend to a maximum of 60% loan to value. And in the budget, you will see that the value of the farm is 500,000. So if you want to borrow, the maximum you would be able to borrow is 300,000, as that is 60% of the value. If you go to AMC, you may find that generally the loan to value is 50%. So you will require more capital, more assets to borrow more money. The profitability of the business will also govern how much you can borrow. the bank will be looking at how you can repay the loan. They will be looking for it to be profitable, certainly in 3 years possibly. Most banks that I've dealt with over the years are quite prepared to allow you to have a loan where repayments are interest only for the first maybe 12, 24 months. They recognise that you need working capital to develop the business, and they are prepared to delay the repayments of the capital of the loan until the business is fully established. The other thing that will happen when you go to the bank with a business plan is they will what they call stress test the loan. Banks tend to, and what that means is that they will agree a level of interest at the interest rate, but they will then look at it at a higher level of interest to make sure the business will be viable if the interest rate goes up. Again, typically this is between 6 and 7%, certainly for AMC. It might be lower with the high street banks, but it is something that will have to be done. And you will have to show that the business can sustain the repayments even with an interest rate that's rising. When the loan is offered, if the loan is offered, and hopefully it would be, there are other things that you need to consider. There's the assets that you offer as security. I always say to farmers, it's important that you don't give the bank more assets than they need. Work out what you need to borrow, and then make sure that you don't give them any more assets than a loan to value of probably 50%. So if you want to borrow £250,000, then offer as security loans that are land that is assets that are no more than £500,000. Banks like to take more simply because it allows them to control the borrowing, and you want to have flexibility. If you want to go and borrow at a future date, you don't want to be tied to borrowing from the bank where your initial loan is with. The term of the loan is also interesting. Farmers tend to want to pay back the loan as quickly as possible, but sometimes that can put pressure on working capital. My advice would be to pay the loan back over a longer period as possible, again for working capital purposes. If you have a loan that has a variable rate and you make more money than you're expecting to, then you have the opportunity to repay lump sums of capital without a financial penalty. The downside of a variable loan and the plus of a fixed interest rate loan is that if it's fixed, you know what your payments are going to be for the entire term of the loan. They don't vary when interest rates move up or down. With a variable rate, they do. The downside of a fixed rate loan is if you decide you want to repay the loan early, then there will be a penalty for early repayment. The last thing I would say about when you're going to the bank to borrow money, make sure you borrow enough at the outset. It is quite difficult if you arrange to borrow £100,000 and then you find that you haven't enough. You need another 20, you need another 30,000. I'm not saying that the banks won't lend you the money, but it raises questions about your planning, and it's harder to go back and ask for more than it is at the outset. Once the business plan is established and once it's agreed and once you're up and running, then monitoring the business plan is important, regardless of whether you're in your first 12 months or whether you've been trading 5 years or longer. How often would you do it? I would say probably once a quarter, at least once a quarter, so you can see exactly what's going on. It's quite straightforward. It's just looking at income and expenditure to see where you are in relation to the bank balance. You need to be looking to see whether you're ahead of the cash flow or whether your deficit is higher than you were expecting. And it's also understanding why that is, and if things aren't going to plan, exactly what you're going to do about it. It's important not to panic, particularly if you're 3 months into the business plan and things aren't as they should be. 3 months in a business, in the life of a business, is a very short period of time. So it's, you know, don't panic if things aren't where they are after 3 months, but you need to be aware of the fact that they aren't going as well as could be expected, and then you need to be considering about what you're going to do about that. This is reflected on the ongoing performance review. Ken's already talked about the things that affect income and expenditure. There's the number of pigs that you sell per year. There's knowing your market. There's the price. Income, it's important that you hit the income targets that you set yourselves. If you're not going to do that, or if you have unforeseen costs that you weren't expecting at the outset, it is important that you identify those as soon as possible. Because if you can see them, then it provides time to make the changes. It gives you time to notify the bank, and you can contact the bank and say, look, things aren't working out as we expected. We're going to need a bit more support. If you do that and let them know in advance, rather than suddenly you have bounce payments, and then the bank are ringing you up and saying, look, I'm very sorry, but we've had to return these payments. It's just good practice to inform the bank rather than the bank informing you. It's easier to know what's happening in the bank, on your bank account, with online banking and mobile banking apps. So there's probably less excuse to be unaware of what's happening in your business and what's happening in your bank account. But it's good business practice to review the business, and also it shows that you're in control. It shows that you know exactly what you're doing, and that you're fully aware of what's going on within your business. And that's me. I'm done. Thank you for listening.